What is up, guys? You have Brad and Jordan back to talk draft with you guys. We're getting Jordan over here into Instagram, and then once we get him going, we got some stuff to talk about. We have some news. It's good. How's it going, Jordan?
I'm doing phenomenally. We are 24 hours away from the biggest decision the Niners have made in my lifetime, so I'm thrilled.
You said it perfectly. It's the biggest decision in your lifetime, the biggest decision in my lifetime. It's the biggest decision in most Niner fans' lifetime because this will change the entire trajectory of the franchise, coach's trajectory, John Lynch's trajectory. I mean, we're already seeing now, as we are less than 24 hours away from the start of the NFL draft, we're starting to see the smoke pick up around potential trades, specifically involving current 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo. But before we start talking about that rumor and that smoke, did you have the opportunity to see Nick Mullens' post on Instagram today? What were your thoughts on that?
I did, and I know a lot of people as of late had some not so fond memories of Nick Mullens. His play wasn't as much as we would have liked. It wasn't as good as we would have liked it to be this past year, and that's totally fine. But I think Nick Mullens deserves a spot in 49ers lore forever for that Thursday night game against the Raiders and a tough season when we were all feeling down. I believe they were 1-8, 1-7 going into that game, whatever it was. Last battle of the Bay ever, and it wasn't just he pulled out a gutty performance when he dominated the Oakland Raiders in their last ever game against the 49ers as the Oakland Raiders and put a stamp on the Niners owning the Bay Area one last time. So I think Nick Mullens forever deserves some praise for that. It's going to be more of a kind of like a cult following. It's not going to be like he's this guy that rattled off a bunch of Super Bowls or anything like that. But I think he deserves a small place in 49ers history as the guy that put one last beat down on the Raiders while they were both in the Bay Area.
Absolutely. I had the privilege of being at that last Battle of the Bay at Levi Stadium when, we didn't really know if it was going to be CJ Beathard who was going to be starting, who was dealing with some injury. Then last minute on that Thursday night game, we find out Nick Mullens is going to start. We were pretty injured at that point, and we were going up against a playoff contending team in the Raiders. So it literally going into it, everyone was like, there's no reason that the Raiders should lose this game at all. And Nick Mullens comes in and lights it up. The 34-3 beating of the Raiders will go. Well, I will always remember that. That will always live with me. Hashtag Bay champions. That was it. We won the Bay. I don't care what any Raider fans have to say. And I got to shout out Nick Mullens because that night was magical. That was a magical night. The atmosphere in Levi's might have been the most poppin' it had ever been up until that point in Levi's history. And Nick Mullens had a lot to do with it. That was the game, too, where he got verified on Twitter mid-game, kind of became like a 49ers legend overnight. So, yeah, it's unfortunate to see him head out, but obviously we understand the circumstances at hand, and the 49ers are moving in a completely different direction with their quarterback position, which leads us to the Jimmy Garoppolo rumors. Now, if you guys haven't seen it yet, there's been reports coming out of Boston that the Patriots are actually working on a revised deal to help facilitate a trade to the Patriots. And so essentially like what we saw with Teddy Bridgewater getting traded today from Carolina to Denver, Carolina agreed to pay $7 million of Teddy's contract in order to facilitate the trade. It sounds like something similar is happening with Jimmy. Now, there have been reports to come out and refute it, but I just think they're refuting it because they didn't want that to leak and it got out. But that's my take. What do you think about that whole situation, Jordan?
So basically there's there's a lot of complex variances, but there's two basic ways that you go through a contract restructure. One is that you push up bonus money and you kick back guaranteed money and you free up cap space in the intermediate. Ultimately, you're going to be responsible for that money and then some on the back end. With Jimmy Garoppolo, it's going to be the second variance, which is just, hey, you're making this amount of money. You haven't been able to stay healthy. We don't really think that you're worth the amount of money you're due currently, but we want you to play for us. And if there's a mutual understanding and agreement between both parties, you're going to come in and take less. So ultimately what I think is happening is New England is looking at Jimmy. Jimmy knows his time in San Francisco is done. I think we can all safely say that at this point. Kyle's talked about how he wants a starting quarterback and how the injuries have been, he's been fed up. And as somebody who watches very closely, his body language on the sideline when he has been healthy hasn't been the best either. I think that it's time. It's run its course. Thank you for the memories. We're moving on. So what's the best landing spot that's going to work out for him? Because remember, Jimmy has this no trade clause, so he can ultimately nix a trade to anywhere that he would be potentially going if the 49ers were to ship him off somewhere. So you send him to a place that he has familiarity with. The coaching staff seems to still be very high and like him. He's familiar with the scheme. But ultimately, New England's not going to pay him the $26.5 million that he's due this year. I'd expect it to be somewhere between 12 to 13. And remember, that deal that Cam Newton signed is incentive-based. So ultimately, if Jimmy were to go and he were to beat Cam out in a training camp, which I'm not certain is a certainty. I don't think that Cam Newton is, somebody that we should just say, oh, well, he's going to be a backup. It would give them a healthy competition to have. But ultimately, what it's going to come down to is that the Patriots are basically going to say, hey, we want you, but we don't want you at this price. And Jimmy's in a position where if he wants to start and he wants a fresh chance to have that starter role somewhere, which he clearly won't have in San Francisco, what better place than where his career ultimately started at the beginning? So it'll be something to watch. I will say this, though. I do think that New England is going to wait until probably the middle of the first round, maybe till day 2 of the draft to make that move, because even if you really are enamored with Jimmy Garoppolo, at 15, they would be smart to sit back and watch how the quarterback market plays out in the draft, because maybe, I know 49ers fans really don't want to hear it, but if the 49ers do end up taking Mac Jones at 3 and maybe Trey Lance goes 4 or he even falls a little bit, all of a sudden you're looking at a scenario where maybe Philadelphia takes a quarterback. You don't really know with Jalen Hurts. I don't think Miami will. I don't think Cincinnati will. So now all of a sudden you're at a spot where these quarterbacks are falling. Maybe New England moves up and gets a younger guy, and that would really prevent them from probably moving on to a guy like Jimmy when they could get a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance or one of these guys. So I think they're going to wait and they're going to be smart. They've always been very methodical with what they do, but I think it's very clear at this point. All signs are pointing to Jimmy's time here is coming very soon to an end. Whether it's going to be him being traded or ultimately, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they ended up cutting him, honestly, and let him just kind of forge his own path to where he wants to go next if he were to not go to New England.
Right. And we talked a lot about what came out of that press conference and a lot of the language that Kyle Shanahan was using. And it really just felt like they were done even talking about the situation anymore. I would have to agree with you. I feel like, unfortunately for Jimmy, he will probably be taking snaps under center elsewhere in a different jersey in 2021. It's something that we have been anticipating and preparing for just based on, reading the tea leaves and doing all that kind of stuff. So it's not a big surprise to us necessarily, but it gets us kicked off really with trying to, again, start preparing ourselves for tomorrow night, because tomorrow night's about to be popping, and there's going to be so many things that happen. And like you mentioned, the Patriots probably are going to wait a little bit to see what happens and see really how it plays out, see if any of these quarterbacks fall. I mean, hell, if Chris Sims thinks, Justin Fields is going to fall to 32, and if there's anyone in the NFL who thinks that as well, then I would absolutely wait during the draft to see if that's the case. Because if you see one of these guys fall and you are a Bill Belichick at that time, I think it's safe to say you do whatever you can to go up and get one of these guys, because they're going to offer a lot more in the long-term value rather than probably what Jimmy could get you for a 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick. So, but it'll be interesting to see. It will really be interesting to see play out. So that's some of the we signed a offensive lineman with O-line depth, Tom Compton. It's probably exactly what he's going to be, is some O-line depth to come in and play in a pinch if needed. So I think the 49ers, and I want to talk to you about this, Jordan, really quick. with all these moves that the 49ers have made leading up to the draft, you think about the Arden Key signing, Mo Hurst, Wayne Gallman, now Tom Compton. Do you feel like they are just filling all the holes before the draft to just ensure they're literally need proof? So that leaves them just strictly picking best player available.
I think it's a combination of that and the fact that this has been just such a strange offseason because of the way that last season went and how the salary cap did shrink a little bit. And it normally is jumping. It decreased a little bit for the first time in a while. So a lot of guys did take 1-year deals. A lot of guys weren't looking to sign those longer, even just 2 to 3 year deals, even as depth pieces. So put them in a position where guys like Arden Key and Maurice Hurst and Wayne Gallman and a lot of these guys, they might not be able to have gotten all of them for the price they did in a regular season. So you're getting the value because of that. And then also the benefit would be, just like you said, you're getting an ability to not only take best player available, but with the amount, the Niners have 9 picks in this draft. And with a lot of them coming in the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds, you could move some of those picks to package and move up. If there's a guy you really like in the 3rd round, if there's a guy you really like in the 2nd, you could use those picks to attach to your 43 that you already have, to your 102 that you already have, and move up and guarantee that you're going to get your guy. Because that's one thing, for as many faults as John and Kyle may have had, and for as many guys they may have missed on, they have lived by the sword and died by the sword of getting their guys. And I think that that's something that is admirable, because ultimately, when you're pouring in this much time into the draft process, you're going to shut out outside noise. And that's why I think the 49ers draft board, as much as they, value input from others, I don't think any outside opinion is going to change that. So again, you put yourself in a position where I don't think 9 rookies are making this team anyway. So maybe you package 3 or 4 of those picks, you end up taking 5 players, and it puts you in a spot where you don't have to sit and wait for your guy. You can jump up and get them, which is what it really felt like they did from 12 to 3. And if the reports about them doing that for Mac Jones are true, we're going to have to wait to see. Hopefully he ends up being a stud and he ends up being, a very good player. But we ultimately have to trust Kyle and John. If that's really their guy and they identified him as being the one, we're going to have to let it play. I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody else what they have to do. I'm going to try to let it play out before I get upset about it, because ultimately they made that decision with one. There's no way that they just did it with, hey, there's 3 guys we really like. There had to have been one guy that they really like. So if you apply that same logic to the rest of the draft and other positions, particularly with that 2nd and 3rd round pick they have, I think ultimately those depth signings with veterans not only give them guys that are veterans that understand how to play in the National Football League, it just gives you so much flexibility on draft day to go whichever way you'd like.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And also, too, there's still the conversation going around talking about, if you draft Lance, maybe you should keep Jimmy. Do you really think that is in the thought process for the 49ers? Or do you really think that if you get Lance, Jones, or Fields, they're day one ready?
So I think it's actually, it's not exclusive one or the other. I think that Fields or Lance both could be day one ready. But I also think that the 49ers did a tremendous job this offseason of retaining a bunch of talent while also not putting themselves in a position where it was like, because I'll be honest, looking at the financial stuff before Prague worked his magic on a lot of these deals, I was like, man, it's going to be really hard to bring back K1. It's going to be really hard to bring back Ferret and Trent Williams and Juice and all these guys, and having Jimmy eat up all that money. And then especially when they made the trade up. But props to the 49ers front office for allowing Jimmy's money to work within the budget and not hamstring them from retaining any of these guys. And in terms of extensions, for Fred Warner's the first guy that I would think of who I expect to get paid before training camp officially starts and before he throws on pads. You can still get that done with future flexibility, knowing that Jimmy could be cut next season for no dead money. He could be cut now for very little dead money. So they've put themselves in a position ultimately where they can keep Jimmy, and it's not going to hamstring the team financially. So I don't think that they're in any rush to get rid of him for nothing. The only way I could see that happening is if Jimmy was just like, you know what, like, I don't want to be here. You guys clearly don't want me. I want a fresh start. I could see a situation where if it was really just like a personnel management where it was going to be there's going to be friction because of it, I could see that. But in terms of pure roster building, they're in a perfect position where they could ultimately have Jimmy come in. Let's say they draft Trey Lance. They could have Jimmy come in. They could have Trey Lance come in. If Trey Lance wows the team in camp and they feel that he gives them the best chance to win week 1, then they could still have Jimmy be that insurance policy and be that guy to where, hey, maybe we threw him into the fire too quickly. He's not ready. You could throw Jimmy in. You don't want to be in a position where you're throwing quarterbacks in. We saw with Miami last year with Tua and Fitzpatrick going back and forth. But it's better to have multiple quarterbacks who are capable of starting rather than none. And we've seen what's happened the last couple seasons when the 49ers have had their lone starting caliber quarterback go down. And no offense to Nick Mullens and CJ Beathard and some of these guys, but when they come in, it really it limits what the team as a whole can do, no matter how talented that roster is. So ultimately, I think that they will look to move on from Jimmy if they can, but they're not in a position where they have to do it. And that position of strength is so valuable because it really does give them options to, again, where maybe they get into camp and Trey Lance doesn't look very good. One thing that Tyreek Hill talks about all the time is Patrick Mahomes looked terrible in his first training camp as a rookie. They all thought he was going to be a bust. He had that year to kind of, get seasoned, learn from Alex Smith, wasn't rushed into things. And then he went out and won an MVP his second year and a Super Bowl in his third year. So I don't think that you have to follow that same mold, but having the flexibility to do that and make Trey Lance earn that starting spot, or if Justin Fields earn that starting spot, rather than just, trading Jimmy and be like, hey, you're our guy now. There's a little bit to be said for having a guy have to earn that role rather than just be like, hey, you're the third pick. We got rid of the other guy. Like, it's all on you now. So I think they're in a good spot now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you make a lot of compelling points for the straight fact of the 49ers have made their way through this offseason without creating one single pigeonhole. Like, they aren't in a situation where their backs are up against the wall in any regards when you're looking at the roster construction and how everything's building out. So with that being said, if they're not getting the offers that they want, they're not getting the compensation in return for Jimmy, they can always just keep him. And like you said, just wait to see, let it play out. Hopefully see what the situation is on later on down the road, because we hear a lot of the conversation about, well, this roster is ready to win now, and rookies typically aren't going to come in and lead these teams to a Super Bowl. So with that logic in mind, then you might want to hold on to Jimmy if you're not getting the most compensation in return that could lead into, combining and trading up to get another blue chip player to add with whichever quarterback is drafted at 3. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see what happens now that it's out there, that it's being reported that there is a potential trade for Jimmy. Was that intentional? Was it not? Will that create maybe a team like Houston, who's, I would imagine they do have Tyrod. But you have former Patriots GM or director of player personnel, whichever title he held, and Nick Casario, who was instrumental in doing a lot of the due diligence in drafting Jimmy Garoppolo out of Eastern Illinois. There could be a fit there, and that could kick up a wave of interest. So, but that being said, it's going to be really, really interesting to see how serious all these reports about Jimmy Garoppolo are within the next 24 hours, because we're really, I think, going to have a good understanding of what is going to be happening here. It feels like something's about to pop. So it's going to be really interesting. So with that in mind, and talking about the Jimmy Garoppolo trade and moving on from that and getting back to the draft. So again, we're going to have to, it's the night before the draft. It's Draftmas Eve, Jordan. So we have to talk about the quarterbacks. We've talked about them probably almost every night this week, and it is what it is. Comes with the territory. But it might be prediction time. I think it's time to put our money where our mouth is. And, we've talked about all these prospects in every different angle possible. But I was on with some followers earlier asking them who they are going to take at 3. If you're Kyle Shanahan, Jordan, and I'm excited to know what your answer is, I really am. If you're Kyle Shanahan and you're selecting at 3, we're going to go ahead and assume Trevor Lawrence goes 1, Zach Wilson goes 2. Out of the 3 remaining quarterbacks, who is Jordan Elliott taking at pick 3 for the San Francisco 49ers?
I would be happy. I'll just say I would be happy with any of the three, truthfully. I think that's why it's nice that the 49ers put themselves in this position. But ultimately, what it comes down to is I like things that all of them do. I think that Justin Fields is a dynamic athlete. We've talked about how he extends plays like Russell Wilson, very accurate, cerebral guy. Mac Jones, as much as people bag on him, he still is a very good pocket passer. I just think pocket passers have been discounted a little bit because of all the toolsy guys coming out. But his footwork is very good. He throws very well under duress. And then you have Trey Lance, who I think is the biggest risk of the three due to the fact that he only had that one full year on tape. It was in FCS at a lower level of competition. But when I look at Trey Lance, I see a blend of a lot of the things that I do like about Justin Fields and that I like about Mac Jones. It's been reported at a massive scale how smart these NFL teams think that Trey Lance is. And a lot of people have gone so far as to say he's the smartest QB in the draft, not just of the 49ers options, but of everybody that's a quarterback eligible in this draft. So ultimately, I've wavered on this. And again, I would be happy with any of the three. And if you watch the live tomorrow, whoever they pick, I will have something prepared to tell you why you should feel good about that pick. But I'm going to take Trey Lance just because if you're moving heaven and earth to get from 12 to 3 and you're sacrificing this much capital to move up and get your guy, make it count, swing for the fences, take a risk. And I just think that the combination of his cerebral capacity to process information and the intelligence that it's reported that he has, coupled with the just raw physical strength that the guy has at 6'4", 225, 230, wherever he is in that range. I think he has the biggest arm amongst him, Fields, and Jones as well. So it would be Trey Lance for me, and I think Trey Lance is also a guy that could come in and could start right away week one. It's not a situation where you have to keep Jimmy and you have to have him waiting in the wings. I think he could come in and learn the offense and learn a simplified enough RPO-centric, heavy quarterback run, read option, a lot of these concepts that you could work in for a rookie. I will cite this. Kyle, when he was calling plays for Washington with his dad in 2012, they had the second most efficient offense in the entire league with RG3 as a rookie quarterback with a very similar skill set. So Kyle's proven he could do it before. I think he could do it again. And ultimately, again, my reasoning is that I really like all three of the guys, and I don't want to be somebody without conviction, but it's been so hard to choose. So if I really have to pick one, I'm going to take Lance just because I think he molds and blends so many of the things that I like about Fields and Jones as well.
I like that pick. I honestly wasn't expecting you to go that way. We've talked quite a bit about these quarterbacks. I wasn't necessarily expecting you to lean that way, but I understand all of the reasons. And part of those reasons are, just for example, we talked about this a while back, but Trey Lance has taken the most snaps out of under center out of, I believe, any one of these quarterbacks, and it's by a large margin. I think if you look at Mac Jones in that same regard, I believe he's taken 10 snaps under center. I couldn't remember if it was from last year or his entire career. But the disparity between, what we consider pro ready, a lot of that is taking snaps under center. That is being able to do the quarterback center exchange, turn your back to the defense to execute play action. What Kyle Shanahan executes, arguably, I think is about 50% of the time he's running play action off of, the run game. So that's the whole thing with Trey Lance. When I jumped into Trey Lance's tape, I was expecting a gimmick guy. I was expecting Paxton Lynch, from I believe Memphis back in the day. I was expecting like this gimmick guy who had great stats and efficiency numbers, and then you realize he only threw behind the line of scrimmage, which is why he was so efficient, et cetera, et cetera. But when you get into Trey Lance's tape and you see how he executes, he's executing NFL-style philosophies that translate so well to what Kyle Shanahan does. And again, you talked about all the information that's coming out now. We have known that offense puts quite a bit on the quarterback's plate. And the fact that he can handle it, manage it, interpret it, get everyone in the right spot, including running protections, being able to decipher certain protections, whatever. he has a great opportunity to really be able to slide in and start right away. So I understand the pick. It makes a lot of sense. Plus, you look at his age too, right? How old is he? 20 years old? You know, in dynasty football, which I lean on quite a bit because that's how I build out my rosters and be my own GM and things of that nature. It's basically, I'm looking at that. That is a big factor, in my opinion, for building a franchise. You want to get guys that you can mold at a young age and develop and bring along. If you bring in Trey Lance at 20, by the time he's 24, he has 4 years of experience. We drafted Deebo Samuel at the age of 24. We drafted George Kittle at the age of 24. So I think a lot of those things are really intriguing. But if I had to go ahead and make my prediction, I guess it's my turn, for who the 49ers are going to select at number 3, it's obviously a really hard decision, as you've talked about, and we've spun our wheels on back and forth. But my gut feels like it's going to be Justin Fields. I feel like it's going to be Justin Fields, but I don't know. I could be completely wrong. And, I end up crying. We'll see what happens. But I really, really do like Justin Fields. His ability, I've envisioned him in Kyle's scheme for quite some time, and I can just see him completely opening up what Kyle is trying to do, the same way you talked about what Trey Lance can provide as well. So I think in that regard, we would both feel pretty good about either one of the quarterbacks, if it was Fields or if it was Lance. So since you picked Lance, that's who you're predicting. I'm picking Fields. Let's say we're both wrong. How are you feeling if the 49ers select Mac Jones at 3?
Well, so I thought you were asking what I would do if it was me. So if I'm making a prediction right now, I've come to terms with it, so I'm not as upset. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it. If the reports are true that Kyle Shanahan moved up for Mac Jones, and I can promise you guys, I've watched hours and hours and hours of tape trying to figure out what the hell he saw, and I can see some things that Kyle would really like. I have a very hard time believing if that was the guy that he moved up to get, and that's who he felt so comfortable with to go up to get. And again, that could be total smokescreen, could be totally just not true, and it's just the media has a month of airtime to fill. But if that report has any bit of truth to it, I have a very hard time believing that Kyle Shanahan is going to budge from his original gut feeling and his original guy. So I'm bracing for Roger Goodell to walk up to that podium and say that Mac Jones is the pick at 3. And again, I would rather see I would rather have the optimism of an athletic guy with upside that could run, that could add a dynamic element to the offense. But I understand why Kyle might like Mac Jones, and it ultimately puts him in a situation where he's going to have a lot of pressure on him to succeed, much more pressure than he would if it was Fields or if it was Lance, giving these guys time to groom. But there are things that I do really like about Mac Jones, and I can see why Kyle would like him too. We get so caught up in arm strength and mobility that sometimes I think we forget the best thing, in my opinion, a quarterback can do is consistently throw a ball with accuracy and touch and placement. And if you go back and you watch Mac Jones, he was a guy that was constantly putting the ball in the right spot, was constantly threading the needle, was fantastic under pressure the majority of the time he was facing it. The only thing I would add, though, is that a lot gets made of Trey Lance only having 17 starts. Mac Jones had the same amount of starts, albeit against slightly better competition. But I am bracing for Mac Jones being the pick at 3. I just think that the way Kyle, I will say this, anybody who watched the press conference too, the way Kyle had that press conference go down, it seemed like he was very defensive and he was very like, well, hey, let's let this play out before we get all up in arms. And I don't think people would be that up in arms about Trey Lance or Justin Fields. I think people will riot if it's Mac Jones, and I can understand why they would feel that way. So if I'm making like an official prediction, I hate to say, I think it will probably be Mac Jones. I did my final mock today, and I had it as Trey Lance just because I'm hoping to put that positive energy out into the universe that it will be Trey Lance. But Kyle's a stubborn dude. I love the guy. He's a phenomenal coach, but if he's set in his way that this is the guy that's going to put me over the top, I think it might be Mac Jones, guys. I'm really sorry to say it. I'm not rooting for it. I'm not pulling. I'm just saying, like, I think that's ultimately what will end up happening.
And I think you make great points. And I think us as fans, we really do need to brace for that. That is an absolute possible outcome of all of this. And I'll tell you why I was awake at night thinking about, you know what, I really do think Mac Jones could be a possibility. Now, it could be a ton of smoke. It could have been Fields all along. It could be he's trying to do everything he can to ensure Fields does not go 1 or 2 to the Jets. I believe that partially to be true based on how I've watched this offseason play out, but there is his history to go back on. And if you look at Kyle Shanahan, the guy passed on Mahomes and Deshaun to trade up in the 3rd round to draft CJ Beathard. So that is what was sticking with me last night. I was laying in bed and I was like, I had like a light bulb moment because I was just thinking about who could he really take? Is he really liking Mac Jones that much? And then CJ popped into my head. And I remember when they took CJ, and I remember when they traded up to take CJ. I was a big Kittle guy. So I watched as much Iowa film as possible when leading up until that draft season, and CJ just didn't even spark the smallest of interest when watching him. And you look back at everyone's rankings and you go back to the football guys and you see it, and they're like, they didn't understand it. They didn't understand the slot to where he was taken, let alone trading up to get that guy. Well, here we are again, right? Kyle Shanahan trades up, and you think it could be the Deshaun Watson-esque type player or the Patrick Mahomes type player in Trey Lance or Justin Fields, but it could be Mac Jones. It really could be Mac Jones because, again, you have to look at his track record. And so this is why this draft is so huge, in my opinion. It's what is Kyle going to rest on? Is he going to rest on what he has done in the past, how he has handled everything in the past, or is he evolving? Is the franchise evolving? Is the personnel department evolving to a different style quarterback? That is the question. So, but I think as fans, we should all absolutely brace and prepare for Mac Jones to be the pick at 3.
Yeah, and that's the thing ultimately. So I will say this. There is a range of outcome where Kyle drafts Mac Jones. We're all pissed about it. We get super upset. Mac Jones comes into camp. He shows that deadly accuracy. He shows that good footwork. I don't like comparing to guys like Matt Ryan and Drew Brees and these guys that have won MVPs, played in Super Bowls. I think it's unfair. But if there's something that Kyle sees where he thinks he could get the same kind of execution, because again, with Mac Jones, when you're watching him, arm strength is great. But there's plenty of guys who come to the NFL that have had cannons for arms that just weren't able to throw with accuracy, weren't able to throw with touch. And then you get a guy like a Drew Brees, who was never really been a guy with a huge arm, but is the leading passer in NFL history because he was consistently able to hit his spots, was consistently able to go through his reads, get the ball out. So we have to, it's going to make it easier to understand why that pick happened if you look at try to focus on the positives of why Kyle would like the guy. And again, I understand like going through this whole process and watching Mac Jones and then comparing him to athletes, toolsy guys like Lance and like Fields and being like, what the hell is Kyle Shanahan thinking? Are you kidding me? But I think I'm just speaking for myself personally, and I totally respect if anybody disagrees. I believe Kyle Shanahan has earned the equity to go and select his guy and handpick his guy that he believes will execute his vision and his offense and lead this franchise for the future. If it ends up being Mac Jones, I think that it's unfair of me to rush to judgment before I watch him actually take snaps at the NFL level. But again, Kyle is going to be on the hot seat, and he's likely not going to get a second chance to handpick his guy if Mac Jones comes in and ends up being a bust, or he comes in and these rumors about him partying and drinking too much or whatever, stuff has come out about him. If that stuff ends up being true and he ends up busting because of that, again, that's a situation where I could see Kyle's leash getting very short compared to where if he took it. We talked about this yesterday. If he took a Justin Fields and it was a problem with the epilepsy or there was a medical condition or something like that, that's kind of out of your control. So I believe in Kyle Shanahan. He's earned my trust until otherwise. But if he takes Mac Jones and Mac Jones ends up not being very good, or he just ends up being just kind of this average Kirk Cousins level quarterback, I'm a huge Kirk Cousins fan. You could have gotten Kirk Cousins for a singular first-round pick from Minnesota. I have no doubt about it. If he ends up being that level player and you gave up 2 extra first-round picks on top of it, and you don't even get the guarantee that he's going to be as good as Kirk Cousins, I'm gonna lose a little bit of that trust that I have in Kyle Shanahan. But as of this moment, I have faith that he will make the right pick for what his vision is. It may not be the right pick for what we want as fans, but I trust whatever he wants his vision to be. And ultimately, I really don't care how they do it. Get that 6th Lombardi, get another Super Bowl, get us over the hump. I don't care how you do it, dude. I just want to win football games at the end of the day.
We all want Super Bowls. We all want to win. We all want to go get that 6. We desperately need a championship for this championship level organization. We want to get back to being that type of team where these colors represent championships. They represent playoffs. They represent greatness, like the great teams that came before us. So with that being said, I think you make an absolute perfect point. Kyle has earned the ability and deserves the right to take any quarterback that he wants. And in a perfect world, we wouldn't judge that quarterback, and we would have this blind faith in Kyle that he's going to pick the right guy and the guy that the whole, fan base can rally behind. But for me, who gave him that blind faith in 2017, I'm taking a little bit different of approach this year, because that's exactly what I did with Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson's one of my all-time favorite prospects ever. And I knew going into the draft that they weren't going to take him, and I was perfectly okay with it. I didn't lose 1 minute of sleep. I didn't sweat when they took Solomon Thomas. I was excited and was ready for the next chapter of 49ers football. But because of that blind faith, because of what I truly believed Kyle Shanahan was in regards to his play calling and what he was bringing to our team. So for me, going through that situation, seeing how it's progressed up until this point, I'm nervous. I am admittedly nervous because back in 2010, when the 49ers drafted Colin Kaepernick, I loved Colin Kaepernick coming out of Nevada. If you go back and watch Colin Kaepernick's tape out of Nevada, I mean, electric. I'm not sure still I've really seen a prospect that has looked like Colin Kaepernick. When you see the combination of throwing ability and running ability that Colin had at Nevada, I feel like I didn't get to see Colin blossom into what he should have been. Like, let's say if he maybe had a play caller like Kyle Shanahan to build a scheme around the player and not try and fit a player into the scheme. So my fandom is involved. We like to try to analyze and look at all this stuff objectively, but I will admit 100% my fandom is involved in regards to this pick. I want to root for this pick. I want to see what I wanted in Colin Kaepernick. I want to see what I wanted in Deshaun Watson. I mean, we have to also remember, too, the 49ers were hot and heavy after Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson doesn't look a dang thing like Mac Jones. So it's just, there's, of course, plenty of different levels and ways to look at it. But I think I'm just so stuck on just like, I don't want what we just experienced the last 3 years to then reset our franchise another 4 to 5 years, if that makes sense. So jump right in.
So can I give something? So this is, and again, I'm not just going to sit here and just try to defend Kyle Shanahan blindly, because if you pass, the fact that it wasn't that he passed, it was that he outright didn't scout those guys is what we were told. And John Lynch came out, I think we've all kind of forgotten, I know I did. He came out and he said that when he went to Patrick Mahomes' pro day and he was watching him throw in person, he texted Kyle and was like, hey, we might want to rethink this whole thing. And Kyle was like, nope, we're going to stick to our plan. But I'm just trying to, this might help. This has helped me accept the decision a little bit. So you watched a lot of Solomon Thomas coming out. I watched a good deal of him in the Pac-12. I admittedly wasn't as high on him. I wanted Deshaun Watson. I was right there with you. But he was drawing a lot of comparisons. So you have to remember, this is right as Aaron Donald was breaking out, and Solomon Thomas was getting a lot of those comparisons to that tweener, DN, D tackle that can kind of play that 3-tech, undersized, but quick, has good pass rushing moves. So hypothetically, let's just say that, there's only one Aaron Donald, so I'm not going to compare him to Aaron Donald. Right. There's only one Nick Bosa, so I'm not going to compare him to Nick Bosa. But let's say he was a player that was slightly below that level where you're getting that kind of impact immediately like we got to see from Nick Bosa and like we've seen from Aaron Donald. And then you combine that defensive stud with Kirk Cousins. If you're building a team, would you rather have one singular Deshaun Watson, or would you rather have an almost Aaron Donald level player in Kirk Cousins? Because to be honest with you, I would probably lean for the really good defensive player and the known commodity at quarterback, no matter how good I think Deshaun Watson is. Deshaun Watson was a top 3 quarterback in football last year statistically with any advanced analytic and everything, but the team around him sucked. And the Texans won, 4 games last year? Right. So, again, I'm not excusing him passing. I'm just trying to say that the philosophy for that pick, trying to build up the defense and getting 2 really good players that they thought, let's say Nick Bosa was taken in the 2017 draft, I would rather have Nick Bosa and Kirk Cousins than just Deshaun Watson on his own. And obviously Solomon Thomas isn't Nick Bosa. I'm not pretending he's Nick Bosa. He ended up not being very good at the NFL level for whatever reason. But I understand when they made that pick, what the thought process might have been in regards to that. So, again, I'm not making excuses for him. And, again, he should be held accountable for the fact that he didn't extensively scout these guys. And the Mahomes passing on him, I get it. Mahomes was a guy with a lot of red flags. But Deshaun Watson is a guy that it's pretty inexcusable to pass on. So I understand where you're coming from. I'm just saying I think there might have been a theory and a method to the madness that they had. And if Solomon Thomas pans out and is an all-pro level player, maybe we're not having those concerns. Is basically what I'm trying to say. And he wasn't, and I get that. And you can't just say, well, what if every player they drafted was good? It doesn't work that way. But the thought process going in before you make that pick, you're not making these picks with the assumption that Solomon Thomas is going to bust. You're making that pick because You're confident that he's going to be good, or you're just making it because John Lynch had a class with him at Stanford and really liked the guy. Because that seems to be the narrative too, and honestly, it makes way more sense now if you go back and you watch the tape. But
dude, so that's the exact thought process, which is why I was okay with the pick. That literally what you just described was exactly what I was thinking of why I was okay with not getting Deshaun, and understandingly. We are just getting started in 2017 with Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch, whole new personnel department, whole new coaching staff. We got to tear this roster down and build it back up. So I understood that there was a lot of work and that one quarterback wasn't going to fix that. And so I was big. I sold myself on Solomon Thomas. I was absolutely one of those guys who foolishly said he reminds me of Aaron Donald because of how dominant he was on the interior, being a smaller defensive lineman. Me playing center and guard in college and going up against those guys and going up against, top 50 national prospects from the D-line position that are built exactly like that, and understanding those traits firsthand, it just felt like if you could have replicated what Donald was, and even just a fraction, if you could have get 75% of what Donald is now, that would have been a solid pick, and you have been able to build a lot around and do all those kinds of things with the defensive line. So I agree 100% to your point. I thought I was getting a Nick Bosa type player in Solomon Thomas. Unfortunately, we know how that story went and what happened as a result. There's, of course, a lot of outside circumstances that lent into Solly not being who we thought he was going to be, whether you want to say he's playing out of position, personal tragedy off the field, et cetera, et cetera. It just didn't turn out how we wanted it to. But your point is on point 100%, because that was exactly my reasoning for being okay with the 49ers passing on Deshaun Watson. So
I think, honestly, the thing that we should hold Kyle accountable for more is the fact that they okayed that trade with Jimmy Garoppolo, and if the plan really was to wait for Kirk Cousins, as intrigued as they might have been about Jimmy Garoppolo, the fact that they couldn't even get through one season without waiting to sign Kirk Cousins, and then they inked Jimmy to the large. Well, it's been passed since, obviously, but at the time was the largest deal in NFL history based on a small sample size where he started 5 games. That to me is the bigger red flag than him passing on those guys in the draft. Because if you were that convinced that Kirk Cousins was going to be your guy, that you're not going to scout Deshaun Watson, who went toe-to-toe with an Alabama team loaded with NFL talent and won a national title and showed guts and talent and mobility and all these things, and you couldn't even get through a full season to get to the guy that made you overlook this player, that to me is the more egregious offense, especially as we get to this point now where it looks like they're moving on from Jimmy, and especially throughout the duration of their relationship where it looked like there was a lot of frustration between the two. It's not like if they made that trade for Tom Brady, which is reportedly what they were originally offering for, I'd understand it a little bit more. Okay, no offense to Kirk Cousins, you're not Tom Brady, dude. But the fact that he couldn't get through that 2017 season and actually get the guy that made him pass on Deshaun Watson, I don't think we hold him accountable for that enough. And again, I love Kyle Shanahan. That's the thing that pisses me off the most about his tenure so far, is that we never even got the Kirk Cousins experience. That's what made you pass on Deshaun Watson, and instead we get Jimmy Garoppolo, which obviously hasn't worked out. It is what it is, but that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion.
No, you're right, because I have my own personal feelings about that as well, because at that time, I really liked Baker Mayfield. And at that time, the 49ers hadn't won a game yet. So they were in line to get one of these quarterbacks, whether it was Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. It doesn't matter. They were all available. Again, it's a very similar draft with at least having the perceived top 5 quarterback prospects that were available at the time. But since then, they had an opportunity to, again, get a rookie and get a guy who they could develop and mold and build and do all that kind of stuff that following year. And they didn't do that either. They opted for what felt kind of like a safer pick. And of course, in 2017, Jimmy comes in, wins 5 games in a row. We're like, our savior is here. We're saved. Hindsight being what it is. But that still doesn't change the fact that I was a little upset when they made that trade. I really was. Because I've been a rookie quarterback guy forever. All offseason I was tweeting it this year. Please get me a rookie. Please get me a rookie. The reason I was tweeting it, because I know based on that history, right? It just doesn't feel like Kyle wants a rookie or wants to develop a rookie like that again, like he did in Washington with RG3 and Kirk Cousins. So I agree. It's a bunch of things we can hold him accountable for, right? So with that being said, as we kind of move around our draft talk, it's gonna be we're less than 24 hours away. We're gonna know by now, this time tomorrow night, who the 49ers quarterback is, whether Shanahan's ego prevails or, he goes in a direction that maybe we don't know. So it's going to be really interesting. Do you foresee any craziness that we maybe haven't talked about happening tomorrow night?
Yeah, so I'm not really for it. I forget if we talked about it in depth. I know I've talked to you about it off air, but the 49ers have had a lot of contact with Nijee Harris. He was spotted recently wearing a 49ers mask during a workout. He said he's talked to the 49ers more than anybody else. Some people who I know who get very good information that are in the know have said it's not just, rumors. There's actually some validity to it. Now, the thing is Nijee Harris is a very good player who's he's obviously not going at 3. They're clearly not going to take him at 3. 49ers don't pick again until 43. He's probably getting picked somewhere in the middle. So that's something I would watch out for on draft day. And again, this goes against my principles as somebody who believes that running backs are guys you could take later in the draft. Their production is easily replaced. The shelf life is short, all those things. But as a fan of the 49ers, as somebody who's born and raised in the Bay Area, having a guy that went to high school, started in Antioch, local guy, grew up rooting for the Niners, wants to be here, and a very talented player, I would be, I could take that a little bit easier than if it was just like a trade up for somebody like Etienne or Javonte Williams, who again are good players. But just watch out for a trade up for Nijee Harris, trading back into the first, maybe up a few slots in the second. If Nijee Harris is still floating around up there, I could see the 49ers making a jump up to get him. And then you add Nijee to whoever you take at quarterback, plus that dynamic skill set group that has Kittle, Ayuk, Debo. You have a little bit of thunder and lightning with him and Mostert. You still have Jeff Wilson. You have Austin Walter. You have all these guys, and all of a sudden, this 49ers team that was down and out last year is going to be back bullying the league. Kyle's going to get back to throwing 30, 40 burgers up on other teams on a weekly basis. So that's the big one I'd say I'd look out for, is Nijee Harris somehow ending up on the 49ers and the 49ers finding a way to land that stud running back that we haven't really seen. No offense to Mostert or Jeff Wilson, Breida when he was here, but that, really highly touted, I don't want to say stud because Raheem Mostert's been a stud, but a highly touted bell cow 3-down back that you're going to give 300 carries to a year. I think it would be very interesting to see that in Kyle's system.
Absolutely. In our experience, though, too, as well with Kyle and his running backs, he hasn't really had a full-on bell cow in regards to having a running back who just totes the rock 30 times a game. If you remember back to the 2019 season, every single game it was Tevin Coleman playing, and then it was who was the hot hand after that, and then it was Mostert, and then that's how we saw Mostert come to his rise. So still, if Kyle wants to run the ball, run it well and run it efficiently, you still need fresh legs at the running back position. And Nijee Harris is a world beater. You get him back in the Bay, you get him with a rookie quarterback. And I think that's all part of the plan, right? Because Kyle Shanahan needs to get back to run first. He needs to get back to gashing these teams, running his outside zone, opening the running lanes, and then hitting them with play action, hitting them with, outside zone, inside zone, RPO, zone read. If he can do all those things and have Nijee in the back, Mostert in the back to do all different kinds of things, it just opens up his offense immensely. But off topic, quarterback collective, we know, run by Kyle's agent from our understanding. They just posted a tweet, and I'll pull it up on the screen. If you are on YouTube, you will be able to see it. Apologies if you are not streaming on YouTube, you won't be able to see it, but we can explain it as we look at it. So as I have it here up on the screen, the QB Collective has tweeted quarterbacks of the NFC West. They only show 3 of the quarterbacks: Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, and Kyler Murray. And they have they have shown their baseball pictures of them, because they were prominent baseball players. Justin Fields was a baseball player. What do you think of this tweet?
I think that the QB Collective stuff is interesting, but I think it's more so just about Justin Fields than it is the 49ers. So I think a tweet like this, there's a strong correlation to guys being good at baseball and that translating to the quarterback position. Patrick Mahomes was a baseball player. His dad was a Major League Baseball player. It's really getting these guys being able to throw from every arm angle. You get guys like Kyler Murray and Mahomes who played shortstop, center field. It just creates a different throwing motion that you don't normally get for somebody who would strictly play football. So I think there is a strong correlation between these baseball guys. I just don't know how much that has to do with the 49ers personally. I just think that it's more so that this QB Collective has had very high-profile NFL coaches running it, but they haven't had a highly touted prospect, to my knowledge, come out, or at least one that's as touted as Justin Fields is. So I think they're just doing their best to get exposure for the brand personally. The only other guy they really have that I'm aware of in the system is DJ Ugalele from Clemson, who's going to be there for the next couple of years, who might end up being better than any of the guys in this draft. I think he's going to be a stud.
He's first round pick or first overall pick. Future.
Mm-hmm. So they haven't really had a guy, I think, to expose the brand like that. But I do think that there is something to be said for guys that are playing the quarterback position specifically and are baseball players as well. Because again, you're creating arm angles, you're throwing from different ranges of motion that you normally wouldn't in football. And it takes arm strength to get a ball from center field to home plate, from the in the hole at shortstop to first base. It's gonna ultimately increase what you're able to do. But just with that treat specifically, again, I think it's more exposure just to, hey, we're QB. I had no clue what QB Collective was until 4 months ago when Javi Vega was like, hey, check out this QB Collective stuff. So like, I just don't really, I try not to read too much into any of this stuff. I respect them pushing their brand and pushing their, getting exposure for their guy. I just, like the biggest one for me was the one where they kept tweeting about like a pipeline to get, high school talent to coach by coaches to the NFL. And they kept tweeting Fields with Shanahan together. And I was like, all right, like this isn't fair. You guys are just teasing us at this point. Like that's not cool. But like the ones like this, I think are more so. Again, it's just brand exposure. Because I'm looking at the tweet now, and yeah, I think it's just exposure at this point. And I'm pretty sure the Matthew Stafford one is him. It's him just throwing a first pitch at a Tigers game. I'm pretty sure.
It's not, but he does have a baseball background, right?
I didn't know for sure. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, it would make sense because he has a cannon for an arm, but
it looks like he is just throwing out a first pitch. I do agree with you to a certain extent about, of course, they are in the spotlight now more so than ever. Because of their connection to Justin Fields. And I think they are, of course, continuing to build the brand. I think you've kind of seen the brand pick up steam a little bit in the last 4 months. You can kind of track how they're tweeting and posting and doing all those kinds of things. But they're stirring the pot. They're stirring the pot because I only see 3 quarterbacks in the NFC West in this picture. And they're talking about the NFC West specifically. Of course, the connections to Kyle Shanahan, Justin Fields are there. So it could absolutely be nothing. Like it literally could just be 3 NFC West quarterbacks that play baseball. And it could honestly have zero relation to Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers. So I just thought someone had mentioned it in the chat, and I thought it was interesting that we should maybe pull it up, take a look, see what our thoughts are on it. I don't think in any sense that this means that Fields is coming to the 49ers in getting the pick tipped from QB Collective. I think you're to a certain extent, they're taking advantage of this opportunity and the exposure. But they're definitely playing with it. They are definitely playing with it, to say the least. So I just think that's funny, man. It's like, night before the draft, that's what you put out. All right, let's go.
Yeah, and this is the time I think where it's just kind of like, I feel like this. Me, we've talked about this at length. We talked about it over the weekend when we were together. I am at the point where if they take any of the 3, I have already justified to myself why that's the pick. So I'm not worried about it. I still think that there's an avenue that Zach Wilson somehow ends up a 49er too. Right. And I know that he's probably locked. The Jets are taking a quarterback. It's not that they wouldn't be a quarterback. It's just if they like one of the other quarterbacks. I still don't think that that's off the table. Again, it's a very minuscule chance of it happening. But I have talked myself into justifying any of those guys. So I'm doing okay, dude. I honestly thought I'd be a nervous wreck. If I was all in on Justin Fields, I would be extremely anxious right now because I'd be like, man, Kyle Shanahan's really going to pick Mac Jones over Justin Fields, or he's really going to So I've come to a comfortable spot where I'm okay with it. But I'm worried that tomorrow morning I might wake up and it might really set in where I'm like, hey, as much as I like a lot of these things that Mac Jones does, he's not Justin Fields and he's not Trey Lance athletically. And my whole thing is this, is if Kyle is as good of a coach as I think he is, you have to take the athletic guy and coach him up and earn your bread as a coach, or, show your strengths as the coach and coach this guy up, put him in this system that's so highly touted for how easy it is on the quarterback. And you get all the benefits of you as the play caller, setting this guy up for success and their athletic ability. I mean, unless they're like planning on competing at like Wimbledon too on the side, like if the 49ers are going to start making like a French Open tennis team and that's why Mac's the pick. I can't see
Ruxin and Mac that duos.
Oh, could you imagine? Yeah. So that's the whole thing with me is it's like I can understand it, but it just doesn't make sense why they would have to move up that high, because I don't know who would have been that enamored with that with Jones between 3 and 6, because the Eagles moved from 6 to 12. If the 49ers could have moved up to 6, if they moved up to 6 and they only gave up the singular first-round pick that Miami ultimately gave up to go from 12 to 6, I would have a lot less issue. And I think people would have a lot less issue with them taking Mac Jones at 6 if that was really the guy and they moved up, because who's going to leapfrog them? I don't think that Miami was going to take Alabama quarterbacks back-to-back years. I don't think that they were going to take this. there's no way they would have. Maybe Atlanta trades back with somebody, but I just don't understand why you would pass up that guy. It doesn't make sense to me. The only thing, again, that I can come back to is there are small little things about Justin Fields' game that I think if you are really nitpicking, you might not like. But again, how much of it is on him? He had the highest sack rate, and he held the ball longer than most of the other quarterbacks coming out of this draft. But again, a lot of that is due to Ohio State running that option offense where the receivers have to declare their intentions. It's so dependent on the coverage, what the receiver's doing. It wasn't a tragic flaw where it was clearly like, oh, man, this is him. Or I hate to say, what we've seen from some 49ers quarterbacks where they get lost in the pocket, they start batting on the ball, and they end up just eating sacks they shouldn't eat. So to me, it doesn't make sense why they would get all the way to 3 because it makes me feel very hypocritical because, again, if you need your guy, if that's your guy, go get him. But it was for Mac Jones. Like, really? Like, it's I'm going to have to hear it physically said by Roger Goodell for me to finally wrap my head around it. Like, I'm close to acceptance, but I'm also like, how the hell did you not just move to 6 or 7? Like, plenty of these teams would have traded back. But you went all the way to 3, and that's where I'm with you, where I know you're still thinking it's Fields, and that's where I'm leaning more. It has to be Trey Lance or someone because it makes no sense. Who would have jumped to take Mac Jones between 6 and 3? I don't see any possibility of that happening, really. But again, teams' evaluations are way different than yours or mine or Daniel Jeremiah or Bucky Brooks or any of these guys that do mock drafts. So maybe that possibility existed. I just don't see how it could have happened, dude.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm actually less nervous than I anticipated. I was a little bit more nervous, I think, earlier in the week. But kind of like you said, I think I've come to grips with any 3 of those quarterbacks being a possible selection, and including Mac Jones. I've talked about Mac Jones enough, and I've really never slandered Mac Jones. I just prefer the other quarterbacks that are available other than him, and that's where that's being driven from. So if Mac Jones is the pick, will I like it? No, I won't like it. But I'll be able to understand it and understand he's not AJ McCarron, right? We're not drafting AJ McCarron hopefully in the 3rd. I would have to say Mac Jones is a couple tiers above AJ McCarron. We had this conversation the other day, which was a good conversation to try and get our heads around this. Tua was a top 5 pick, right? Would you take Tua or would you take Mac? And you were a Tua guy, and you spun you spun it through your head, and you're like, I'd actually think I'd take Mac, even being a Tua guy. And I said the same thing. I would take Mac over Tua as well. So when you start to look at it in that kind of lens, okay, maybe it's not as terrible as it is. It's just it's the combination of the force feeding from the media, right? And then it's the also just who's available, and then the compensation and all of that, and the history. And so it's just all wraps up into one. It's really easy to get caught up in the emotions of it. And if it's Mac Jones, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be disappointed. That there are going to be a lot of people that are going to be disappointed. I know there's tons of people on social media right now stacking Mac Jones memes that don't paint him in a positive light. So social media people, like, we're going to be on live. We're going to be doing this. I'm going to be posting during it. I'm ready for it because if it's Mac Jones, it's going to be a wave. It's going to be a wave of negative energy from fans who maybe don't watch as much film as we do, who don't necessarily have as much of an understanding of what Mac Jones is capable of. Of course, I will be disappointed. I would be lying to you if I wasn't disappointed. But I can understand it. And we got a question here on YouTube. So, first of all, D-Lo Fiasco, you are our first ever paid question. So on YouTube, you can do the super questions or whatever they are. So I just want to thank you, D-Lo Fiasco, for submitting us with our first paid question. We really appreciate it. So we're going to take our time to answer it. He says, do you guys think that Broncos have intel on the 49ers pick given the connection between Elway and Lynch. Maybe that's why the Broncos made the move for Teddy. Do you want to take the first stab at this?
Yeah, real quick. If I recall correctly, too, I think D'Lo was there when we were doing shows on the Goldmine account, too.
Oh, was he?
If I remember, I believe so. I could be wrong, but the name looks very familiar. So, if thanks, you. I really appreciate it. I think that move was very telling because it tells me two things. It tells me, one, the Broncos clearly don't believe in Drew Lock, which I've been saying for a while. I just don't think Drew Lock is very good. He has a great arm, but that's pretty much it. And two, I think it tells me that he's confident that John Elway, I forget the GM's name. I know he's from Minnesota. I forget the GM's name. But that football operations department in Denver is not feeling great that their guy is going to be there at 9. And who that guy may be is up to interpretation at this point because obviously none of us know. But if we're looking at it this way, let's say the 49ers take Fields at 3. Lance goes 4 to Atlanta. And then Mac Jones would be the guy left. There are still multiple picks between that 5th spot to the 9th spot, clearly. So a team could move in and take him. But I think it puts them in a spot where they're kind of sitting there and they're like, hey, we like Mac Jones, but Teddy Bridgewater can do a lot of the things Mac Jones does. He can be a guy that can distribute. We saw him with Joe Brady's offense. He wasn't great, but he was at 70% completion, was an efficient guy. He had 15 touchdowns, 11 picks. So, again, it wasn't, world-class numbers where it's like, oh, this guy's great. You can't draft a quarterback because you picked him up. But I think it sets them up in a position where if Mac Jones was the only guy left, they could pivot and use that pick on somebody else, and they could take a Micah Parsons, a J.C. Horn. I don't think they're going to add another receiver because they're already stacked at receiver and at tight end. Maybe they take a Kwity Paye or a Christian Barr, somebody like that, or maybe even a tackle. But it puts them in a position where it makes me think more so if that was the case and there was intel being shared, it would lean more towards a Trey Lance, Justin Fields tip by the Niners. And again, I don't think the Niners told them anything, but if their gut feeling is that the 49ers are going to take one of the more athletic mobile guys and Mac will be left on the board, instead of investing a first-round pick in Mac Jones, who could turn out to be really good, but is going to also need to be a guy that probably needs really good skill position players around him and is going to need an offense built around him facilitating the ball to these guys and probably predicated on yards after the catch, all that good stuff. We could get Teddy Bridgewater for a 6th-round pick, and while he may not have the ceiling that Mac Jones could potentially have, we know that he could come in and he could execute this offense at that facilitator level where we're going to scheme guys open and we're going to just ask him to get the ball in the hands of playmakers at the cost of a 6th-round pick versus a 1st-round pick. So if it were to tip the hand of anything, I think that it would lean more towards the 49ers would be taking a Trey Lance or a Justin Fields more so than it would be a Mac Jones.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And D'Lo was our good friend over on the Goldmine chat. So D'Lo, thank you. We really do appreciate you. That means a lot to us. It really does. And so from my take, I do think the Broncos have intel on who the 49ers are going to pick. I tweeted about it earlier today because when we talked about Justin Fields' first private pro day being run by Kyle Shanahan, it was typically going to be just the 49ers. But then it came out that the Patriots were going to join, then the Falcons were going to join, then the Panthers were going to join, and the Broncos were going to join. And so when we figured that out, I literally said, oh, they're talking trade. That has to be why some of those teams are there. They are there to discuss trades, again, get in the same room and at the same area and talk about these things and talk about the game plan and what we're seeing leading up to the draft. And here it is. We see the Panthers trade Teddy Bridgewater for a 6th-round pick and take on $7 million of his cap hit. And there you go. There's the trade. So I really do think that there is intel. I think all of those teams that we mentioned all have a connection to one another to begin with based on Kyle Shanahan or Mike Shanahan or John Lynch. There is a connection on multiple levels. So to answer D'Lo's question, I absolutely think there is intel there, and that's part of the process. Is they're ensuring they have a backup plan. Just like when the Patriots went and signed Cam, they would be SOL if they went through this entire offseason without Cam. Like, could you imagine? Would they have signed anyone? Would they have signed these two massive tight ends without Cam? So you have to do some of those kinds of things. You have to make some of those kinds of moves in preparation for what's going to happen leading up and what happens on draft day. That doesn't mean you have to stick with that. You can pivot. You can trade on draft day. You could trade this guy. You could move that guy. You could take another quarterback if you wanted to. So there's so many different ranges of outcomes, but I do agree that, the Broncos probably knew a little something was up. And so they went ahead and to figure that out. And Javi say, go check out the QB Collective recent post. We pulled it up, dude. We pulled it up. We saw the NFC West quarterbacks. No Jimmy. And a bunch of baseball players. So it's interesting. It really is interesting. And it's just going to get more interesting. See all the smoke, see everything, and how as we get closer and closer to the draft, rumors pick up. Players are starting to get moved. X, Y, and Z is happening. These people are talking about this move. Lions wanted to move up to the Falcons to get Jamar Chase. Like, we're jockeying for position right now. This is leverage season. Everyone wants to have the upper hand in regards to the leverage. So we'll see. And yeah, Javi, that's what we were saying. We're saying Fields played baseball. Fields was a pretty darn good prospect at baseball as well. So, of course, the natural connection there is available. So it's just funny, man. It's just funny to see how all of this goes. It really is. Oh, let's go, Angelica, and right like that. Perfect timing. Thank you. Or angelic ambition. Thank you. He says,
this is my kind of question too.
Okay, I'm going to set you up and tee you up for it. So if the Niners drafted Justin Fields, what wide receiver would fit best with him, since we don't have a true deep threat to take advantage of his fantastic deep ball? Great question.
So first of all, thank you for the donation. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the awesome question. Thank you to D'Lo too for the previous question. I think they're both awesome. But in regards to this question, I will say really quickly, I think we didn't get to see Brandon Ayuk show his full potential as a deep down the field threat. I think he's a guy that moves much quicker than he ran his 40 injured. And I think 40 times are a little bit less indicative of how quick a guy is in pads. So I think Brandon Ayuk is a guy that could be a deep threat, but if we're going for just pure, let's take advantage of Justin Fields and that pretty moon ball that he throws, that just beautiful, aesthetically pleasing deep ball, it's De'Ami Brown out of North Carolina. Ooh. You grab him at 43. De'Ami Brown has been one of my favorite players in this entire draft. And this guy has wheels. He not only has wheels, he can get open, he's smart, he has hands, and I think he would seamlessly fit in with the receiving core that already has Debo and already has Brandon Ayuk. He could slot in, and you would be able to probably get him somewhere around that 43 range. Another guy I would look at is Terrace Marshall out of LSU. I think Marshall might go a little bit sooner because he has the traits to be an X-dominant number one wide receiver. But De'Ami Brown would be my answer 110%. If they took Justin Fields at 3 and they took De'Ami Brown at 43, I would be ecstatic, and I'd be sitting here anxious for the next 5 months thinking about what Kyle Shanahan. I'd be sitting up staring at my ceiling at 3 a.m. thinking about what Kyle Shanahan's going to be doing with that offense.
Oh
because
my goodness,
the fit would be perfect. Yeah, that's a great question too.
It's a great question, and I was talking about this earlier with Jason. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. We talked about it with Nijee Harris, right? The Galaxy Brain thought process of packaging some picks, getting back into the first, taking Nijee Harris. And I was like, well, I still kind of agree with, our original philosophy of pushing running back later, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then trading up into the first and get me Rashad Bateman. Oh my goodness. If you got me Rashad Bateman in that offense with a young Justin Fields, Ayuk, Kittle, Debo, Mostert, you can grab one of these running backs, maybe in the 3rd or 4th, that can be a rotational guy. or trade for a running back, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of opportunities to go out and go get someone if you really, really wanted to get more of a bruiser or a bell cow type guy. But when you talk about deep ball and you talk about Rashad Bateman's skill set, the speed combined with the routes and his control, it reminds me, he's not a pure comp, but he does remind me of Ayuk a little bit. The way he moves and the way he maximizes his speed to set up his defenders and get them their hips turned, and he hits them with the little jab step and he cuts back the other way. Rashad Bateman, to me, can arguably be one of the best wide receivers in this class. And if for whatever reason he falls because there starts to become a late run on, like, let's say offensive tackles, we see Dylan Randudes go, Walker Little, Trevin Jenkins, like we see all these tackles start to go, offensive linemen that maybe we didn't anticipate going at the bottom, and we see some skill positions drop a little bit. Dude, if the 49ers somehow got their hands on Minnesota wide receiver Rashad Bateman, I mean, that dude was on the wrong team. He had no quarterback. He had no one throwing him the ball. He had to fight for every pass he caught. Holy hell, dude. I would be in heaven if they figured out how to do that. But I think your scenario is much more realistic to actually happening. And if Dyami Brown was the pick, dude, we would be ecstatic because we would understand, how do defenses cover that? How do you cover Ayuk, first of all, who hasn't, like you mentioned, we used him in the horizontal game more so than the vertical game. We got to see a little bit more when Mullens was in. And, like, let's say, for example, you had a couple vertical passes in the Buffalo game where you could see Ayuk be a threat down the field. You knew it was there. It's just he wasn't used that way. So you get two guys that I think could be interchangeable. I wouldn't say Rashad Bateman is going to work as well in the horizontal game, but he can then be that burner, that stretch guy to take the safeties out and move safeties away so that Ayuk and Debo just run crazy. Kittle's all over the place. You don't know if he's blocking, if he's going to, do a late release or something. And then you grab someone like a Demetric Felton at running back who can be an extension of a wide receiver. I mean, it's exciting to think about. It really is. It really is.
I will throw out, there's a couple other names that I really like. So let's say they opt to go corner, edge, another position there at 43. At 102, I think I saw it in the chat too, as a dynasty player guy I've really liked the last couple of years is Tylan Wallace out of Oklahoma State. I know he had the ACL injury. I believe he'll be ready to go by the start of this season. He's a guy that, well, he's not the burner that I think Dyami Brown is. He's a fluid route runner, and he knows how to get open downfield. Jalen Darden is another guy out of North Texas who, again, just has wheels. Guy who dominated the Sun Belt Conference, again, where it's not going to be a Power 5 level competition, but he made it very clear he was the best player on the field. And then I'll throw out a sleeper for me. This guy would be somebody on a day 3 guy, around 5, maybe around 6. Frank Darby out of Arizona State, who was Brandon Ayuk the year before.
Yes.
I like Frank Darby a lot because when you watch Frank Darby, he's not the traditional burner. He's not this guy where you're like blown away by his speed. But man, watching his tape, he just got open over and over and over again. And he just knew how to get downfield and how to create separation in space when he was being pressed. And he's a guy who wouldn't cost significant capital with that cachet of picks that they have at the back end of day 3. I could really see there being a scenario where that's a guy that they fall in love with. And those would be the main guys for me most likely. But Frank Darby is just a name to remember. He may end up on a totally different team. He may go undrafted for all I know, but he's a guy that I would keep an eye on. Frank Darby out of Arizona State, I think, would be a tremendous fit, and the risk would be much lower, allowing you to use that 43rd pick, that 3rd round pick on other positions of need maybe, and still getting a guy that could be a deep threat without being that burner in sense of, he's just blowing you away with speed. It's more technique and refined route running and just overall savvy at the receiver position.
I really like that pick a lot because I really think Darby would fit in with this team on multiple levels, not only from a scheme fit, but I think he's the best fit from a locker room standpoint. We lost Kendrick Bourne. We lost that spark of energy that really resonated with fans, resonated with the players. When I was at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, it was impossible not to pay attention to Frank Darby because he was dancing nonstop. And I was just looking at him, and it wasn't like a look at me vibe. It was like, just, you can tell the people that just are energetic and just are happy about life and happy about everything that they're doing. And they just got to dance and do that kind of stuff. That's Frank Darby, dude, the entire time. When E40 Tell Me When to Go went on and he just started going dumb and just started gigging and like doing all that kind of stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, you would be a perfect fit in San Francisco. Not only that, there's so many connections between the San Francisco 49ers and the ASU program, with Herm Edwards being the head coach there, and the connections between John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan and Herm Edwards. So that is I think a very realistic pick that you could be had later. He looks to me like he could use some polish. He's not a finished product. He looks like he can get better, but he has the raw skill set and intangibles to build upon. Kind of like what KB was. KB was this scraggly kid out of Eastern Washington that danced a bunch and found his way onto the roster. I think Frank Darby could do just that as well. Some other wide receivers that I like that could be had that we haven't talked about much. Now, if Kyle wants to get someone like Justin Fields, maybe a bigger body target, because with these types of quarterbacks that we're looking at, they are accurate and they have the ability to throw wide receivers open. I think that's one of the things with Jimmy Garoppolo that we didn't see very often, is that when a wide receiver was covered, elite quarterbacks will throw their wide receivers open and or just throw it into a spot where only their wide receiver could get it. So Nico Collins, to me, is a wide receiver who is not getting talked about enough. He's 6'4", 215. He was a lot of fun. Again, I got so much Senior Bowl bias, it's unbelievable. He was super fun to watch at the Senior Bowl. Now, was he a great separator? No, he wasn't. And that's typically what Kyle covets in his offensive linemen, are these great separators. But Juwan Jennings is not a great separator, and he's like one of those 50-50 go up and get it guys. Well, Nico Collins has underrated route running ability. I just feel like he's such a big guy with long legs, and he's a strider. So it doesn't look like he's moving very fast because his legs are just so long. But he can eat up ground really quickly, and if you throw the ball in his vicinity, he's coming down with it. So that would be a fun target to look at. Dwayne Eskridge would be a lot of fun. He kind of fits in that Demetric Felton, Amari Rogers, Jalen Darden kind of mold. Shi Smith, Debo's protege. That could be a lot of fun. Someone here just put it on the screen. Cade Johnson, another Senior Bowl guy who played really, really well. He could be another great option. There's a ton. Marquez Stevenson, Zach Greer's guy, right? Marquez Stevenson showed me something at the Senior Bowl. Not only does he have elite speed, but he really has the ability to be a legitimate wide receiver. Des Fitzpatrick out of Louisville quietly could be a developmental guy that could be had later on. There's just so many good wide receivers in this class that you could literally find one at every level. Any tier that you're looking for, you could get tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5. You could literally find someone in any one of those ranges. It's just when you want to take them. So there are plenty of options for the 49ers out wide. Angelic Ambition, that was not only a fantastic question. Look how long you got us talking about that. So.
I'd throw in one more too. Dwayne Eskridge is another guy that's just pure speed. He's a little undersized, but the dude is fast as hell. I didn't think you mentioned him, but I think he was at Mobile, if I recall correctly.
He was. He was just like Demetric Felton.
Yeah, so him, and then, like I said, and Frank Darby, who we talked about before, that's another guy to me that I just really like. This class is so deep at receiver that I think it's good that the 49ers are in the position they're in now, where they're looking for a quarterback rather than last year when we all knew they were going to take a receiver, because you don't have to force receiver early. And again, I like Jalen Waddle, I like Devontae Smith, I like Jamar Chase and these guys for different reasons, but there's so much value in the middle rounds with how stacked the receiver class is this year, especially with a lot of these burner guys that have really good speed. So it's a good position to be in. And I think that's a situation too, where if you're getting a Justin Fields, clearly his deep ball from the tape we have, I know it's not NFL tape, so it's not apples to apples, but the tape that he's put on throwing deep balls compared to what we've seen the last few years from Garoppolo, Mullens, Beathard, it looks a lot better. So you're going to be able to build your offense a little bit more, like Brad touched on. Ayuk's had to go horizontal. You can still work horizontally, which is a big staple of what Kyle does, but I would not be surprised at all to see him want to get a little bit more vertical with his offense, regardless of who he takes at QB at 3.
All right, so we got another paid question here from Josh. Josh, thank you so much for sending this through. So he wants to keep talking gems. He wants to keep talking sleepers. So he says, I love the sleeper talk, love the gems talk. What do you guys think? I don't even know if I'm going to pronounce this name right. Emir Smith, Marset, and Tutu Atwell. Give us all the hidden gems. Have you had the opportunity to do much research on either one of these two guys?
I have seen a little bit of Smith Marset. I know that he started to get a lot of steam towards the end. And, shout out to our guy, George Kittle. Anybody who's a Hawkeye, I will give a little bit of, an extra glance. I'm always happy to check out. Admittedly, I have not watched enough of him to give an educated opinion on. But Tutu Atwell, I have watched a bunch of. And Tutu Atwell is a guy that definitely seems like a Kyle Shanahan kind of player. Who he reminds me a lot of is Tavon Austin, when Tavon Austin came out of West Virginia, where he just has this crazy shiftiness, this elite speed. When he gets the ball in his hands, he's just an absolute nightmare. I think there's a little bit left to be desired in terms of route running. But again, most of these guys are going to need to get coached up when they get to the NFL. That's half the battle when you're taking these guys. So I can speak more. I don't know if you've seen enough Smith Marset. If you want to take that one, I could definitely speak on Tutu Atwell. I think he's a great value there. If we're gauging just for the 49ers, if they could get him around that compensatory pick at 102 or that 4th-round pick at 117, he would be a tremendous value there. He's also somebody that would fit that burner, could take the top off a defense, just pure speedster role, but it's not a situation where you're getting just like a Darius Hayward-Bay or one of these guys that's really they're bringing to the table is their elite speed. I think he has some shiftiness to him where you could work in some of those fly sweeps and jet motions and a lot of the stuff that Kyle does horizontally while also giving them the ability to take the top off a defense. So I like Tutu Atwell a lot. Again, Smith Marset, I haven't watched enough of to give a strong, educated opinion on. I apologize. But Tutu Atwell is a phenomenal name. And that's one, truthfully, I'm very glad that Josh, thank you for the donation too. I'm glad that Josh brought up because he would definitely have fit into the previous question about who would fit that deep threat role.
Another good thing about Tutu Atwell too is if the 49ers end up selecting Trey Lance, Tutu Atwell did quite a bit of offseason work with Trey Lance. They happened to be working out together at the same location. Tutu Atwell was Trey Lance's receiver. And to all the points that you speak of, Tutu Atwell is like, again, there's so many of these good wide receivers that have these small frames, but they're so damn fast and shifty, like the Elijah Moores. Like, just because they're small doesn't mean they're bad receivers or they're just gadget guys. They can do so many different things. And so I'll be honest, I have not watched Emir Smith Marset at all. I pulled him up right now. I am watching him right now. And based on I'm watching highlights. So based on first impression, this is first impression only. I'm seeing a legitimate wide receiver. He looks like he's about 6'1", 6'2", good size. He has the ability to make plays off of bubble screens. He has this, so far, some of the contested catches that he's made are pretty damn impressive. He's just taking an end around right now. He's going about 60 yards down the field. He totally looks like a guy that would fit what Kyle Shanahan looks like. Again, off first impression. I'm literally watching him right now. And I'm Josh, thank you. Thank you for putting that name in front of me because I do like him. No, like first impression, like Jordan, if you get an opportunity, like you know, next couple days or whatever, I think he's worth a look. I mean, he's making back shoulder. He's going over the top. He's making one-handed end arounds. I mean, I'd
like to see the measurables too, because he looks like he has very long arms because he's listed at 6'1", but his wingspan looks significantly more impressive than somebody who would do the average 6'1" wingspan.
He looks extremely versatile, like extremely versatile. Again, I keep seeing end around after end around. He's juking people out their shoes. Like I said, I've seen him go up and make these crazy contested catches. Wow, I like him. So you see the ability to run with the ball in his hands. You see the ability for him to be a legitimate wide receiver as well. Wow, I like him a lot. So thank you, Josh, for putting us on to Emir Smith-Marsette, Iowa wide receiver. If you guys haven't had a chance to take a look, go take a look. Seriously, go take a look. I'm going to do a lot more research on him. So thank you, Josh. Thank you.
I wanted to throw out for Tutu Atwell. So there's some interesting stuff that ties into the previous question too. So he had the 9th most deep catches in all of college football if you go back over the last 3 seasons. So that's a very encouraging number considering there's over 110 schools that are going to be logged in Division I. And the amount that I hate to put it this way because it sounds disrespectful, but college players just aren't as good as NFL players. So your ability to go over the top of a defense. I mean, it is what it is. But, you're going to be able to go deep a lot. So the fact that he was among the elites and Louisville's quarterback situation has not been very good. And then on top of it, his average route run, I wish I could pull up the picture to show you guys, but PFF does a really good job of showing heat maps for the routes run and where these guys are running routes. And the majority of Tutu Atwell's routes are outside the numbers, but 20 to 25 yards down the field, 30 yards down the field. So he's consistently running these routes down the field, is familiar with it, but it also has a decent amount in the short to intermediate area. So again, he's a guy that I just think he when I look at Kyle Shanahan, he's such a smart guy when it comes to designing these plays that if you give him athletes and physical specimens like Tutu Atwell that just have this crazy speed and this crazy shiftiness, he's a guy that isn't going to break a lot of tackles, but he's also a guy that's not going to put you in a position to have a tackle broken because he's going to be shaking you before you even get close. So I'm very glad that Josh asked that question because he's somebody that should have been talked about before, and I apologize for not mentioning that. He would fit this offense tremendously. And again, it's a situation where he reminds me a lot of Tavon Austin, who probably should have never been a top 10 pick. But if you're getting that skill set in the 3rd round, early in the 4th round, it's tremendous value in my opinion. So yeah, Tutu Atwell is definitely a name that I would watch. And even if he doesn't end up on the 49ers, he's somebody that you're going to want to watch just because he's explosive. If you're a fan of the sport of football, you'll probably have a pretty good time watching that guy with the ball in his hands.
Yeah, so Josh, great question. And you just put me on to someone that I'm going to have to do a lot more research on because Emir is how it's pronounced. Right, Peyton? Emir, like meerkat. He's legit. So he needs to be talked about more. I'm going to do a lot more research after we get off this and look into that guy. Shout out to 49ers Focus.
That's my guy. That's our guy.
That's my son right there. Let's go, boy. So good looking on the donation, my guy. If you guys aren't following 49ers Focus on Instagram, go shoot my guy a follow. Appreciate that, man. That's awesome. So yeah, dude. That was a great question by Josh because now I'm really excited about someone that I hadn't watched one lick of film on. So I'm
keep drafting Hawkeyes. Just keep the pipeline going. Let's keep drafting Hawkeyes, dude.
Well, I even got Niner Central in here. My guy knows how to look at prospects too, and he said, "Have we looked at Iowa tight end Shane Beyer yet?" It's basically saying not productive in the pass game. Obviously, it's Iowa, but he's fast for a tight end, great run blocker. Sounds like someone we know. Sounds like someone because George Kittle, maybe. Oh, look at the guy. Oh, focus. We love you. Thank you so much.
You don't have to tell me twice, dude.
Yeah,
just sprinkle me, dude.
just make it rain on us, boy. But appreciate you, focus. That's awesome, dude. That's our guy for sure. Let's see. Let's get to a couple more questions. We're 135 in. We'll probably do maybe 5-10 more minutes. It's been a great conversation though so far. Love the inputs too, especially on YouTube. Absolutely picking up. So let's see what else. There's some other questions in there. Here's the easy one. Puka. What do you think about Puka, huh?
So I like to keep my evaluations mainly to what they look like on the field. So I will stick to that initially, but real quick, Puka does have off the field concerns. He does have a domestic violence issue. And without getting into details, just my stance is this: if you're convicted of something like that, I personally would want no parts of you. I would just respectfully remove that player off my board. It's just something I wouldn't feel comfortable with. There's no place for domestic violence anywhere. So I would have a difficult time taking him. It doesn't matter how talented they are. Having said that, I don't think he's remotely talented enough to justify taking a player like that. The biggest problem for me is he's very undersized. I think he does possess a good amount of shiftiness. He's quick. He has good vision. He was playing on a Kansas team that wasn't really setting him up for great success. They're a basketball school, to be completely honest. They're not a team that's going to recruit great O-line talent. There's just so many other guys that I like ahead of Puka. When you factor in the fact that he weighs like 165 pounds and the fact that he has some off-the-field concerns, I wouldn't feel great about it. So I would throw out a couple names that I do like that you could probably find in that similar range. Number one for me is Jamar Jefferson out of Oregon State. He's met with the 49ers on multiple occasions, so I'm holding out hope that if they do pull the trigger on a running back, it is later in the draft and it is with some day 3 capital, because I think Jamar Jefferson could be special in this system. I really like Javian Hawkins. I think he's a player that could be special in this system. Another guy that's a little bit raw, might need some fine-tuning, but has that home run ability. Kyle's talked about how they're trying to hit home runs on every run play. They don't run the ball for 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They don't do this to set up plays. They're running the ball to score touchdowns every time that they're sending plays. And you'd think, well, yeah, every play you run, you're going to want to score touchdowns. Not every team does that. A lot of teams will call a play with the expectation, hey, if we get 5 yards here, this is the goal. Kyle wants to go to the house on every play. So when you're finding guys that have a speed skill set, kind of similar to what we've seen with Breida and what we've seen with Mostert, Javian Hawkins fills that mold. And then the last guy I'd throw out there is Chris Evans out of Michigan. Brad was actually the first person to show me him. So I don't want to be stealing his thunder here, but I really liked what I saw. He had, Brad was going to have to correct me again, like 12 snaps, 16 snaps. It was under 20 snaps, I know for sure, but they were all 16. They were electric. Like every time this guy touched the ball, I was like, oh, like, okay, like he can ball, like he's got it. So those are the guys that I would look at later in that range. And then Chuba Hubbard too is another guy. I don't know. He'd probably be a little bit before then, but just with Puka, it's just, again, I'm not a big fan of his play to begin with. And then you couple in the domestic violence stuff. He would be off my draft board if I was an NFL team personally.
Yeah, I agree with you. I would say Puka reminds me a ton of Phillip Lindsay. A ton of Phillip Lindsay coming out of Colorado, same size. I would say Puka's more shifty, stop on the dime type things. He's actually insanely shifty. But again, to your point, he's off the board at this point. There's plenty of other wide receivers that you can get. Chris Evans is a guy that would be super fire. Even Elijah Mitchell. So I saw Elijah Mitchell pop up in a couple mock drafts over the last couple weeks and get people going on Elijah Mitchell. That's a guy I've been as high on with Chris Evans because, again, my lovely Senior Bowl bias. Those two guys are two running backs that I think could be really, really good and are slept on. Kylan Hill out of Mississippi State, big fan of his. Think he can be legit. Focus. I would pull up your question, but you did use the wrong emoji, so we're not going to be able to pull that one up. I'll pull it up for 2 seconds. Or no, how does this work? I'm running out of time on one of them, so we'll get to this one. Then we'll pop back to Focus and his misappropriation of emojis, according to him. But D'Lo does ask. Shanahan is sending other teams in motion. Shanahan is sending other teams in motion like his O on game day while he runs a bootleg the other direction and hands the QB job to Fields and Lance. Do you kind of get that sense of what D'Lo's trying to say?
Yes, and so this is my whole thing, is that if there's so many ways to look at this, and I don't give a I don't care about being right. I truly do not care about being right or wrong. I'm just trying to understand what Kyle Shanahan is thinking, because there's so many ways to look at this and justify what he's doing. And if I'm looking at it in this sense, I'm looking at it as, all right, Kyle Shanahan knows how good he is as a play caller. He knows how smart he is. The league is going to copy him at every chance they get. Mark Schlereth was talking about how after that year the Niners went to the Super Bowl, every single team that he visited with as an analyst for Fox was trying to copy what the 49ers were doing, and specifically in the run game. So Kyle's always going to be at the forefront of innovation in the NFL, but he's done that with Matt Schaub and Brian Hoyer and Matt Ryan's a good quarterback, but Matt Ryan and Jimmy Garoppolo. Could you imagine what he could do? Like, if I'm him and I'm watching a team like Kansas City, where Andy Reid has been this guy who was kind of underappreciated for a little while.
Oh, yeah.
Has this West Coast offensive mind who came from a very similar tree that Kyle's dad came from, a lot of the same concepts and philosophy, and he's seeing what he's able to do and the plays he's able to call and the things he's able to do, having that dynamo at quarterback with a mobile guy with a huge arm. I have to be sitting here and feeling like, you know what, Kyle's like, I've been getting by, driving my, Honda Accord. It's been which I hate to compare Jimmy to that, because Honda Accords don't break down every other week. So it's a bad comparison. But I've had, I've had my Honda Accord basically. And again, a lot of it is, I'm not trying to throw dirt on the guy. It is what it is. Right. He's gotten hurt. It sucks. But when he's healthy, we're focused on just when he's healthy. It's a reliable car. It's going to get you from point A to point B. It may not blow anybody away, but it's efficient. It's going to get you to where you need to go. Imagine Kyle Shanahan whipping around in a Lambo, in a Ferrari, and, a Bugatti, something like that. He's going He's going to be going dumb. He's going to have the suicide doors up. He's going to be swanging that thing.
Let's go.
So we have to get to a point where we're looking at this, and Kyle Shanahan is like, hey, I'm already I already wake up in the morning and piss excellence. Imagine what I could do with a quarterback that is just this athletic freak that's going to take what I can already give them and take it to a whole nother level. So yeah, I agree with D'Lo there, where it's like, that has to be happening. But then there's like this other part of me that's sitting there that's like, no, Kyle Shanahan knows he's the shit. He knows he's the man. He's just going to take Mac Jones, and Mac Jones is enough for him. So I'm having this internal struggle, but there has to be an avenue to where we're looking at this, where it's like, hey, he's already really good. Imagine how good he could be having this amplified athlete that would add to his system that's already really good on its own.
And here we are heading into tomorrow with Mac Jones potentially being the pick, because you just got me super excited to see Shanahan whipping a Ferrari out in the Bay Area, doors swinging. Oh, man, that's just, I'm hyped now. I just want to go down. Damn it, Mac Jones. I hope that's not the guy. But dude, you got me hyped now. I want to see Kyle go dumb on a Ferrari. Oh God. So real quick, I'm gonna pull it up quick. We're gonna flash it. Just for you, Focus. I know you did this on purpose, but we're gonna indulge you anyways. So who's going to be the pick at 43? Or do we trade up? Eggplant emoji. Do you have a quick response to that? If you had to take someone at 43, and who it would be if you traded up?
So I think I talked about them trading up to take Nijee. If it was me to trade up, and I was going to that same range Najee was in, no offense to Najee, I would be so happy to root for a guy born and raised in the Bay who, again, starred in Antioch. But if it was me, it's an edge rusher. It's going to be Azeez Ojulari or Jason Owe out of Penn State. It would be one of those guys, and that's simply because I will not go back on my own belief that edge rushers are infinitely more valuable than running backs. I think edge rusher is the second most position in football. The hierarchy I have is quarterbacks are number one, and then guys that disrupt the quarterbacks are number two. It would be an edge rusher, and I wouldn't even think twice about it. And the guys I'm looking at in that range, again, would be Ojulari and Jason Owe. And if you stand pat at 43, I'm going to give a shout-out to the boss man at Goldmine. Javi Vega was the first guy to mention this player. He mentioned him about a month ago. I'm seeing him get traction all over the place. I forget if it was Brugler or Albright. One of these guys mentioned him the other day. But Joe Tryon, edge out of Washington. Javi was on it before anybody, any national media, any blue checkmark, anybody I saw. He said, hey, go watch tape on this guy. Check him out. There's a strong chance the 49ers could take him. And the more I watch, the more I really like him. And I'm all in on that being the pick. Big guy, lengthy, could play that speed rusher role opposite Bosa and really give the 49ers that dynamic pass rush that we saw absolutely obliterate opposing offensive lines. So for me, it's going to be an edge player no matter what. I think if they trade up, again, it would be for Owe. Maybe a Jalen Phillips if they're feeling like they're really ready to risk it for a guy that you could argue is edge one in this class. And if they stand pat at 43, again, Joe Tryon is a name to watch, and all credit is to Javi Vega on that one because he was the one who really put him on the radar for me.
Yeah, dude, Joe Tryon is really, really damn good. And he's the guy who flew under the radar because if you remember when the big hype around Justin Fields and Mac Jones Pro Day because they were back-to-back, guess whose pro day was the same day and didn't get any love? But those numbers that came out of that day were impressive. And the second you go and turn on the tape of Joe Tryon out of Washington or Tryon, holy hell, dude. Like, I'm talking about like big time shooting forward body that can move, and it's got the hands, got the counter moves, got the outside pass rush moves. He has everything, and he's a physical specimen. Again, he ain't getting no love because he's a whatever is he, a Pac-12 guy, didn't play in 2020, so just really not on anyone's radar. But I agree, dude, hit him going at 43 would be super sick. Even if he dropped a little bit, that would be fun too if you could somehow get him a little bit later. But if the 49ers went and moved up into that draft, I talked about it already. My wish pick would be to go and get Bateman or Newsome. If you could get me Greg Newsome, Bateman, or Farley by trading up, I would be so hyped. I would be on a completely different level if we somehow came away with the quarterback, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, and then also added one of those guys. It would be next level. It would be so much fun. And dude, shout out to all you guys continuing to donate on YouTube. This is hella fun. I'm not gonna lie. keep making it rain. It's kind of fun. So Cougar Central asked, so did Nick's contract just end, or is the deadline to get re-signed in free agency? So from my understanding, he was a restricted free agent. So in order for both teams or for him to get out of it, the 49ers would have had to just say, we're not going to pay you or tender you, I believe, is how it typically would work. We're not going to tender Nick Mullens, or we're not going to re-sign him to the restricted free agent offer that comes along with it. I think they were just done, and they just kind of ended it there. Do you have any insight onto, Nick Mullens and, his farewell post and anything in that regard?
No, if I recall correctly, the date actually to tender restricted free agents was in March, if I remember correctly, because I believe Brunskill was given his before then. So I think what ultimately ended up happening was the 49ers were in a position where they didn't want to rush anything. They obviously had Rosen on the roster already. They had Josh Johnson on the roster. Jimmy G's on the roster currently. And then after that move up, they probably had a pretty good idea they were going to move up for this trade, or we know that they were in on Watson. So I think it just became kind of a musical chairs situation. where all the spots were filled, and Mullens just there unfortunately wasn't a spot for him, because I think that as much as his play may have been disappointing, I know Kyle Shanahan probably held him in pretty high regard. You hear all these things coming out in TV meetings and stuff like the Buffalo game on Monday night, when they talked about how people in the building believe Mullens is the smartest quarterback on the roster. That doesn't just get brought up out of thin air. There was something to be said there. And when I watched Nick Mullens, I will tell you this: that New York Giants game, a couple throws in that Buffalo game, a couple throws even in the Washington game. Like, he made a lot of throws where he knew where to go with the ball. He just didn't have the arm to get it there. And I think that was the most frustrating thing for Kyle Shanahan, was he had Jimmy, who had a lot of the quick release and the physical ability to hit over the middle, but there was a lot of issue getting the ball to the right read consistently, taking sacks he shouldn't have. You had CJ Beathard, who had an absolute hose for an arm, but again, there was an issue with pocket presence at times. There was an issue with him going through his progressions. So my whole thing was that if you took CJ Beathard's arm, you took Jimmy Garoppolo's release, and you put it with the brain of Nick Mullens, that's basically Kirk Cousins with a slightly better arm. Like, that's literally like Kyle's dream quarterback.
Or Mac Jones,
almost.
right?
Or Mac Jones, maybe. Yes, exactly. So I think the thing is with Nick Mullens is that he just was a guy, again, you have to look at it as they didn't spend any capital to get him. He was an unrestricted guy. Right. Typically backup, like Kyle's very blunt. That's one thing I will always respect about him, is he doesn't sugarcoat stuff to the media. And I imagine he's the same way with his team. He basically said, we had guys that were backups that ultimately ended up playing like backups, and there's a reason why they're backups. And Nick Mullens was an undrafted free agent that came out that wasn't even worth being one of the top 250 players taken in his class, or that was his value by being undrafted ultimately. And he still came out and he competed at a high, I don't want to say high level, but he competed at an NFL starting caliber level for a remarkable amount of games, considering he was undrafted. Because the only other quarterback I can think of that had success in recent memory that was an undrafted free agent was Tony Romo. And Tony Romo was kind of just a once-in-a-generation fluky guy that was probably should have been taken somewhere on day 3. He shouldn't have been an undrafted free agent. So with Mullens, again, we talked about it at the beginning. He will always have a special place in my heart, because I too was at that game, Brad. And I remember that was the first game. I went to dozens of games at Candlestick. I grew up with season tickets there. That was a special place for me. Levi's never really felt special until that Raiders game. That night was the first night where it felt electric, and it felt like the old days at Candlestick really did. And it felt damn good to, I have no animosity towards the Raiders, but it felt really good to kind of, send them packing and kick them on the way out. Like, hey, this is the Bay Area. It belongs to us. It doesn't belong to the Raiders. And Nick Mullens, for better or worse, had a huge part in giving the Oakland Raiders a parting gift of a 34-3 ass whooping at the hands of a guy that wasn't even verified on Twitter when the game started. So it is what it is. But not to ramble, ultimately what ended up happening was the 49ers have much better talent options at quarterback, and Nick Mullens has that problem with his elbow. So it's just a respectful, hey, thank you for your time here. We wish you good things. Don't be surprised at all if he ends up in New York as the third quarterback there.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's a lot that you saw some promise from Nick. I think the Giants game this year, he played exceptionally well and had some really, really strong throws, even in the midst of pressure. And again, of course, the legendary 34-3 game. Can't forget that one. So unfortunately, like you said, I think that is true. It's just he's got the elbow issue. It's probably not going to be a situation where he's going to be able to compete early on in camp, and it's going to be a lot of rehab continuing throughout that process. So it's probably just time to move on. And clearly they're moving in a completely different direction by bringing in Nate Sudfeld, who's probably going to fill in that Nick Mullens role. So I think it's just one of those things where, again, he's an undrafted free agent. It was easy to get out of his contract, and so they did it. And on to the next, right? So that's kind of how I see it playing out. But I do want to thank Cougar Central for the question. We really do appreciate it, man. Thank you for sending that through. That does mean a lot. Let's see. All right. You want to answer a couple more questions, and then we'll get out of here as we're coming up on 2 hours. This is just prep for tomorrow, right? Because we're going to be doing this tomorrow, Jordan and I. It's probably going to be 2 to 3 to 4 hours. Who knows how long it's going to be? The first round always takes forever. So if we're just practice makes perfect, right? We're making sure we're putting in the preparation. So we thank you guys for sticking with us. Let's see. I saw a question a while back. Have you watched what's his name now that I'm blanking on it? It's like Aleem. He's a defensive tackle from North Carolina State. I'm blanking on it. Doesn't help that I don't know his name. So how about we don't go with that question? I did see this question up here though about what our thoughts are on Mustafa Johnson. He's a defensive tackle out of Colorado. He's saying he would have been a first-round pick last year if he declared. Have you watched any of his tape at all?
I believe I've seen a little bit. I just watching Pac-12 ball. I've seen him play. I think that's a position that isn't really a position of need, but you can never have too much depth there. So if they were to address that again somewhere, I wouldn't really want to take him obviously they're not taking him at 3. I wouldn't feel great taking him at 43, but if he's there at 102, 117, somewhere in that range, and they feel that he's going to complement what Kinlaw, Armstead, Ebukam, Bosa, all these guys that they have there, if he's going to complement that rotation of rushers, DJ Jones, these guys on the interior, I'm all for it. The guy that I'm really in on is Stills out of West Virginia, and I know the Niners have met with him a couple times, and I think he's somebody you could get with one of those 5th-round picks. So admittedly, I've watched more of him than Mustafa, but he's another guy that, again, Pac-12 bias. I'm going to support any of these Pac-12 guys that could ball at the next level. We need to remind people that that's a conference that deserves some respect around here. Everybody wants to talk about the SEC and the Big Ten. Again, it's something because of the fact I don't think it's immediate need, and because of the fact that, again, I haven't watched enough to the point where it's a guy like, Marig or Molden or some of these guys that we've watched a bunch of where it's like, no, that's my guy. I don't care. Draft him at 3rd overall for all I care. I haven't gotten to that point with him yet, admittedly, because I haven't seen enough of it. But from what I have seen, I did like, and I think that anybody coming in, it's just like we talk about how the quarterbacks are going to have success coming into Shanahan's offense. Any D lineman that you draft is going to come in with a much better situation on the 49ers than they would with most other teams. So I would be okay with them adding a player like that to supplement who they already have, which is a very strong unit currently.
Right. I like Mustafa Johnson a lot. He kind of reminds me of that DJ Jones build, right? The short, kind of thicker build that has really solid, strong first step quickness. I think the biggest thing for me when I'm evaluating interior defensive linemen, I don't care how big you are, I want that first step quickness. I want the explosion off the snap, because understanding being an offensive lineman myself, you can neutralize a lot of really good offensive linemen if you are just simply faster off the ball than they are. So Mustafa Johnson is one of those kinds of guys, in my opinion, who can just shoot out of his stance when the ball is snapped. And he's shown a lot of really good stuff on tape. It just kind of tapered off. He had a really good freshman year, I believe. And then it just was like a decline in production every year since then. So that typically is a red flag for a lot of evaluators, because they want to see it go up. They don't want to see it go down. And typically when it goes down in production, they kind of flag it. So Mustafa is probably going to be a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick, day 3 guy. But he has some of the same intangibles that DJ Jones has. So I like him. I like him quite a bit. So how about this? We're about a minute away from hitting 2 hours. We have the NFL draft tomorrow. It is here. There's no more. This is the last night of us doing lives in preparation for the draft. So now we have the ability to take a step back, get prepared for tomorrow, get prepared for all the fireworks, because as we led into this, there's a potential of Jimmy Garoppolo getting traded. So we could see some movement there. Obviously, the 49ers are going to be selecting at 3. They could be coming back into the first round, target guys like Nijee Harris, Newsome, Farley. Those guys could all be potential targets. So we could see more than one pick tomorrow. Who knows? But before we break, Jordan, is there anything else that you want to chop it up about?
Real quick, I just wanted to add one thing on Mustafa Johnson too. I forgot to mention. He is from Turlock, so he is somewhat local. So, shout out to the 209, especially to Angie Martin and Brett Rumbeck of 49 GM. They're Turlock natives. So, anybody that's from this area of Northern California, anywhere around here, again, I'm going to root for their success. Ideally, I'd like to see everyone have a successful NFL career, but especially those people that are somewhat local. And the other thing with Mustafa is that his build, again, he's one of those guys. He's 6 foot, 292 is what he's listed at right now. And these undersized guys, every time I see them, I'm like, I don't compare them to, but I think of the success that Aaron Donald has had as that slippery small guy. But one of the cardinal rules of something that Sam Monson taught me was don't chase unicorns. Aaron Donald is a unicorn. Don't chase unicorns. But if you're taking Mustafa Johnson in the 4th round, in the 5th round, I think it's a lot different than taking him in the 1st round or 2nd round and expecting him to be Aaron Donald. So when I see a guy like that, though, I just think, man, if you get him with Chris Kosarek and you get him with that crazy good D-line, you put him in a position to be in 3-tech where he's going to be slippery, getting in between, where he's so strong that you can't bully him, but he's so slippery that he can get in between that guard and center. It's very intriguing to me. But other than that, thank you. Huge shout out to everybody, that was watching. I really appreciate you having me on and doing this. Thank you to everybody who donated too. I really appreciate that as well. I know Brad does too. And I'm just super excited for tomorrow, dude. Again, if you have any concerns about who the Niners are going to take tomorrow, I can promise you I will have something ready for any of the options that they take at 3 that will at least attempt to make you feel slightly better, that will be backed by data, that will be backed by analytics, and will be backed with some genuine enthusiasm for the pick the Niners just made. Even if it's Mac Jones, I promise you I will do my best to make you feel better about it.
And that's the silver lining. If Mac Jones is the pick, we're all going to be stressed out, but Jordan will be able to try and bring us back from the crazy high that we just experienced because we feel like our franchise is ruined for the next 10 years. But it's not. That's the thing. It's not. And that's why Jordan's here. He'll be able to be the voice of reason for the show tomorrow. So we got a lot of stuff going tomorrow. It's the draft. It's finally here. All this talking and hypothetical speaking is over with. So we are going to be going live at 4:45. Gives us a little bit head start on the festivities. Gets us ready to kind of get any news out of the way, get everyone prepped, get everyone in. So we're ready to go right when the draft starts. So come back with us at 4:45 Pacific Standard Time. We'll be right here doing the same thing, analyzing every single pick. And, of course, the biggest pick that matters to us the most, the number 3 overall. So, Jordan, thank you for joining me. As always, 2 hours seems so easy with you. So, hopefully, we can keep this momentum rolling into tomorrow. And hopefully tomorrow isn't the longest day imaginable. And we'll get through it. So make sure you follow my guy, Jordan. Splash Cousin, you see it on Twitter, and then Jordan 49 GM on Instagram. So again, we'll be back tomorrow and we'll do this all again. So we hope to see you guys with us, and we hope to be celebrating quite a bit tomorrow. But if we're not celebrating, or some of us are a little disappointed, we got Jordan, so we're all good. So appreciate you joining me, Jordan. And it's been great. So we'll kick this off tomorrow.
Sounds good, dude. Thanks again for everything. Again, thanks to everybody who watched. I had a blast doing this, and I appreciate you guys. Sometimes I get rolling on tangents, and I just stay talking. So I appreciate everybody who's patient and wanted to listen.
Oh, no, we love it. We love the Jordan rants, so we want to get those going. So appreciate it, man. Everyone have a good night. Get some sleep. Try to hang out with your loved ones. Do whatever you need to do to take your mind off the pick for a couple minutes. And just enjoy it. And tomorrow we'll know. So appreciate everyone for hopping on. Thanks again, Jordan. We'll see you everyone tomorrow.